This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll English. Episode number 61. That's quite a lot. Anyway, in today's show I speak to Dan the Man about forgetting things because Dan has had a little bit of trouble recently. Notice there I said has had because I said recently. Recently goes with present perfect. Anyway, there's some rock and roll grammar just for the start. He has had a little bit of difficulty recently remembering things like the time of the recording for the podcast. So that was my inspiration for today's show. If you have any ideas for shows, please let me know because I'm always looking for some. Anyway, remember all the rock and roll vocabulary is on the website, rockandrollenglish.com. Go there, read the vocabulary, do a quiz on the vocabulary, and generally have fun. And have fun listening, and I will speak to you again at the end of the show. Dan the Man, how are you today?
I'm good, how are you?
Oh, I'm always good, Dan. Have you tried any of the pooing techniques that, I told you about in the last show?
No, you only told me one.
Yeah, I told you a couple. Anyway, Dan, how do we start the show?
With a review.
Oh, yeah, baby. Do we have a review, in your opinion? It's 50-50.
Well, that's not an opinion. I would say yes.
Well, you are wrong, Dan. So, unlucky. We don't have a review. So that is also an invitation to anyone that wants to leave us a review.
Good or bad?
Good or bad, yeah. Or maybe we do, and they haven't sent it to us because, there are so many places to leave a review that it's difficult to check them. So, if you want, that's great. Anyway, it's great to actually start the show, Dan, because we've had a little bit of difficulty, haven't we, this week in recording?
Yes, because you keep changing the time.
Well, let me just tell everyone the story. So, Dan and I agreed on Thursday at 10 o'clock, okay? So, Dan texts me on Wednesday saying, okay, we need to get straight into the show.
Hang on.
Today.
Originally, we had said Monday or Tuesday, and then you changed it to that day on Thursday. Forgetting
true.
Key details here.
That's not true. So he sent me a message on Wednesday saying, let's get straight into the show. No faffing around, which was a nice piece of rock and roll vocabulary. So what does it mean if you faff around, Dan?
I don't even know how to describe that.
See, the word is too rock and roll even for Dan. So if you're faffing around, so normally we start the podcast, we start recording straight away. But sometimes, like today, Dan wasn't prepared because he didn't have the charger. So he said, wait 1 minute, I just need the charger. I just need to do this. That is faffing around.
I was ready before the time we agreed.
Well, we said, let's record immediately. But Dan said, no, I need the charger. I need this. I need some water. That is faffing around, okay? So let's get back to the story. So, yeah, we had agreed on Thursday. Dan thought the podcast was on Wednesday. Then we agreed on Friday. And Dan thought the podcast was on Thursday. And I have got, two reasons, I think, for this. Because Dan is obviously losing his memory. The first is because obviously Dan is 33 now, whilst I'm still 32. And obviously when people get older, they lose their memory. A nice term actually is they lose their marbles, which is obviously happening to Dan. That's one solution possible. The second one is because we know Dan, is a free spirit and does fuck all. Remember, fuck all means nothing. It's like when you're on holiday and you don't know what day of the week it is. And you go on like a 2-week holiday and you think, is it Monday or is it Tuesday? Just Dan doesn't know what day of the week it is. So which one is it, Dan?
Friday.
This is what I mean. I'm not asking you what the day of the week it is. I'm asking you if, one, you're losing your marbles, right, so you're going crazy, or two, it's because you do fuck all day and you don't know what day of the week it is.
Is there a third box?
There's not a third box, no.
What, you actually want me to answer this?
Of course.
What, am I losing my memory or am I just lazy? I'm going to go with the memory one.
Okay, speaking of memory actually, I've got some nice terms here that we say about memory. So Dan obviously has a memory like a goldfish. So that generally means someone doesn't have a good memory. Whilst I, of course, have a memory like an elephant, who are known for having great memories.
It's funny that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's funny. Although apparently the goldfish thing is a myth. So that's obviously, people say that's true, but it's actually not true, I found out. So, maybe instead of a 3-second memory, Dan, you've actually got like a 10-minute memory.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
Well, that's it. So we're going to look at some techniques to remember some stuff to, try and help Dan. And just talk about remembering in general, remembering people's names.
Can I just say, I've done a memory test, and my memory is exemplary.
Oh, exemplary, very good. It's like an example. It's fantastic. That was probably when you were young, Dan. Okay.
No, it was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago, before we started doing this.
Okay, before you lost your marbles, before you started going crazy. So yeah, and then we'll just talk about some probably stories about forgetting things. So the first memory is linking. To help you remember something, you need to connect it to something. For example, if you want to remember the phrase memory like a goldfish, you can connect it to Dan.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Or another technique, you could actually buy a goldfish and call it Dan. And then if you don't want it, you can just flush it down the toilet, which is something we had last week, actually, flush something down the toilet. But obviously that's a joke. Don't flush fish down the toilet. Yeah, don't flush. Especially Dan. Dan. Don't flush him down the toilet. And the other technique, apparently, if you write stuff, apparently you remember better if you write with your other hand. So if you normally write with your right hand, you remember better if you write with your left hand, because you're engaging the other part of your brain. Did you know that, Dan?
No.
Although I thought about that, and I thought it's going to take a long time to write stuff, isn't it?
No, of course. Don't bother. There are better ways to remember things.
Well, exactly. Some of which we'll be looking at now, Dan. So we're going to especially talk about now how to remember people's names. So are you good at remembering people's names, Dan?
I think I'm average. My problem is, it's not that I can't remember names, it's that I don't listen when I'm told their names.
Oh, I am with you on that, Dan. I've just got a block on me when I just don't listen. And I'm actually saying in my mind sometimes, listen to the name, listen to the name, listen to the... And because I'm speaking to myself in my mind, I don't listen to the name. And I immediately think, fuck, what am I going to do?
Have you ever had a situation where you've had to introduce someone to someone and you've forgotten their name, and so you don't introduce them?
Well, yeah, I have had that. And sometimes I just sort of point and say, like, this is, and then they normally sort of interrupt me at some point, which is good. But apparently it's very important, because when you remember someone's name, it shows that they are important to you, which... Obviously, when you don't, it shows that they're not important to you, which is a little bit embarrassing. Speaking of names, do you remember when people called you Gandhi at school, Dan?
I absolutely hated that.
Yes, I know you hated it, which is why everybody continued doing it for quite a long time.
I've also had Danny Longlegs before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite good, actually. I never heard that one. But certainly the Gandhi one, I remember. Like, obviously, Gandhi, the Indian guy.
I don't really hate it now, though. I laugh at it now. But at the time, it wasn't ideal.
I was looking at a quote from Gandhi, actually, that said, "There are many causes I would die for, but there is not a single reason I would kill for." But now we're making this comparison with you and Gandhi. I thought I would ask you, Dan, is there anything you would die for?
What? Yeah, I guess so.
Nothing in particular, then? Yeah, I guess so.
Well, you kind of put me on the spot.
Well, I didn't, because I sent you this question yesterday.
I didn't read your email.
And nice term there, though. You put me on the spot. You didn't give me time to think, is what he's saying. But that's not true, because I did send him these questions.
Yeah. Family and friends. There you go.
Great answer, Dan.
Yeah.
And
well, hang on. What about you?
Probably world peace, Dan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You do so much for it.
Well, that's me. A reason you would kill for?
Well, if someone was going to kill me, I'd make sure I killed them first.
Sure. I'm now generally considering killing the dog under my house because it's still hot here, so I sleep with the window open. And now the dog barks at night. So even when I'm in bed, the dog is annoying me and causing me problems. So I think I have enough reasons now to kill that dog.
How would you kill the dog? I don't think you could get close enough.
Good question. Maybe I could take a gun from my terrace, and when I can see it, I'll kill it.
Yeah?
Yeah, like a sniper. So a sniper is someone that does that exact thing. Hides and then kills you with a gun.
Yeah, shoots you in the back.
Yeah, I'll probably do that. That's obviously a joke. But anyway, so another thing for remembering things is know your motivation, Dan. So obviously your motivation for rock and roll English is very low because you cannot remember the day.
Well, you couldn't remember the time.
What are you talking about?
You text me this morning saying, "Where the hell are you?"
Oh, nice term there. Well, where the hell are you? It's just say, where are you? But stronger. You could even say, where the fuck are you? I was just early, Dan. Okay? I was just early. And so another technique for remembering someone's name, apparently, they say, is to, when you go, say the name again. So say, bye, Dan. My question to that, though, is if you don't remember the name, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, I normally forget the name well before I've said goodbye.
Oh, yeah. After 1 second. And another one to remember the names is, it says here, to get a book and write the names of the new people that you meet at the end
That's
of the day.
incredibly creepy, isn't it? If you meet someone at a party.
It's very, very creepy. Nice word again there, Dan. Creepy is just a little bit weird. That's something that sort of disturbs you. It's a lot of dedication, that, as well, isn't it? You need to be really, I want to remember this. To
carry a book of names.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think I would do that. Apparently, diet helps, though, Dan. Avocado, apparently, is especially good for the memory. Do you remember the interesting fact I told you about avocado?
Something about lawyers.
Yeah, in French, apparently, it's the same word. Avocado for lawyer and avocado. So,
Blueberries are also good for your memory.
Oh, yeah? In fact, I was thinking, now you are a semi-vegetarian, Dan.
Yeah, correct.
Have you noticed any difference in your memory? In fact, maybe this is the reason your memory is becoming so bad, because you are semi-vegetarian.
What, is there something on that about meat?
No, but I'm just wondering why we've seen this dip in your memory. So dip is when it decreases. So we've seen a dip in your memory.
I'll tell you exactly why. It's because you changed the time and date about 3 times. This is why I forgot.
I told you in the messages, Dan, the world moves, okay? And you need to keep up with it. So a nice phrasal verb there. If you keep up with something, you need to move at the same speed. Dan can't do that. Another one, apparently, here is have more sex. So
maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, I was actually waiting for you to make a joke about me there. You missed an opportunity there, Dan.
Well, everyone knows you don't have sex. That's the easy joke.
It's too easy, wasn't it? So that's why you didn't say it. One is lose weight, apparently, which I find surprising because Dan has definitely lost some weight because I saw him quite recently. And the time before that I saw him, he was actually a bit fat, really.
Did you actually think I was fat?
You were a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I do remember you did tell me at the time, but I wasn't sure if you were joking.
Dan, we are friends. I was doing that for your benefit, okay? So I just said, Dan, you're a bit fat, okay? Let's just think about this. So it says use reminders. So obviously like things on your phone. Do you know the difference, Dan, between remember and remind? Many people confuse these verbs.
Well, to remind is an action, isn't it? Like this.
Yeah. So remember is something internal, Dan, like I remember your name. Remind is something that is external. So maybe you, let's say, remember something for me. That's external. So that's remind. There you go, Dan. Now you know the difference.
I actually write down a list every morning of things I need to do that day.
So did you forget to write down the podcast then?
Actually, no, I didn't. I did write it down, but I was rushing around this morning when I came back from the gym because you were half hour early, and I could feel you were stressed.
Well, I was talking about the other days, but never mind. In fact, on one...
No, I did. I wrote it down every day. Rock and Roll English podcast.
Just the wrong day.
Yeah.
I have got some information for you though, Dan. One of the days you forgot, because Dan called me on Skype, because obviously we do the podcast on Skype, and I was doing a lesson. I answered the call and said to Dan, "It's not today, it's tomorrow."
Quite rudely as well, I might add, but yeah.
Well, I was in a lesson, Dan. Okay, I was busy, and Dan said, "Oh, for fuck's sake," and then basically closed the call. But you actually taught a student that term, because she said to me, "For fuck's sake, what does that mean?" And I said, "Exactly this situation. He's angry. It means like, oh no." So he said, "Oh, for fuck's sake," and then she wrote it in her book. So you are just teaching rock and roll vocabulary, Dan, even when you don't know it.
She was 8 years old.
No, she wasn't. And speaking of for fuck's sake, I also have a funny story of a student used that with me recently. Well, we use the Italian equivalent, but just to help people understand. So teenagers, last year I obviously taught teenagers, and like this week they have come back to school and they didn't know what teacher they were getting, and one of them walked into the room, my student from last year, saw me and said, "Oh, for fuck's sake."
Were they?
And I said, "Thanks."
Were they trying to be funny, or were they being quite genuine?
I don't think he was trying to be funny, no. I would like to think that, but I don't think that's the case. He just looked at me and I could see the disappointment on his face, and he just said, "Oh, for fuck's sake."
You just silently nodding there.
Yeah, I said, "Yes, take a seat, please. Shut up." Anyway, Dan, so I've got some other questions about memory. So what's your earliest memory? And don't say I've put you on the spot, because I sent you these questions yesterday.
Playing football in my old back garden.
Jesus Christ, what a great memory.
What do you want me to do? Lie? What was yours?
I actually got quite a good one, and this is generally true as well. The first memory I have is calling my brother a fucking bastard, and basically my mum being very angry with me, because the people at school, the older kids, taught me it. I didn't really know what it meant, to be honest, but I very quickly found out that, that's not okay to say that to your brother.
How old were you?
About 4.
That's quite late for early memory.
Well, I don't know. Maybe because it was just the strongest memory. I don't really remember. What about your happiest memory, Dan?
That time I scored that goal in the quarter-final of the Regional Cup.
Believe me, in fact, it was a stupid question. I knew the answer to that because Dan tells me about that every single day. I was there that day, but I was actually looking away when Dan scored the goal.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I didn't actually see it with my own eyes.
Why?
I don't know. I was just looking the other way. Anyway, have you ever forgotten anything actually important, Dan? Very important.
What? Other than flights?
Yes, I think we brought that up on a different podcast. So remember, we started speaking about that when Dan missed his flight to come on holiday with me. So I went on holiday on my own. Great times.
What about you?
Probably a flight as well, actually. Flights are always bastards, aren't they? If you miss a flight, you really feel like a fucking idiot. And yeah, I've missed a flight. It wasn't a good time. So on that note, Dan, on the negative note, how I like to look at the world, I think it's best we end the podcast. Okay, yeah. So for the next time, just make sure you remember and you arrive on time. That's all I ask.
Okay, well, if you stick to the time that you set, then I'll do that.
I told you, Dan, I live life at 100 miles an hour. Just keep up with me, okay? Come on.
Okay, I'll try.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll see you later.
See you later.
Okay, so that was Dan and me speaking about forgetting things. So let's look at some of that rock and roll vocabulary. We had no faffing around, which is a lovely piece of vocabulary. Remember, that means when you are just doing stupid, unnecessary stuff. The example we used is obviously at the beginning of the show. Sometimes we go straight to record the show, or sometimes one of us has to faff around because the computer's not ready, maybe needs to go to the toilet, needs to change something. So that is faffing around. Another one is to say when somebody loses their marbles, which means that they are going a bit crazy and often forget things. Generally, people say that about older people. They say, like, he's losing his marbles. Like, he's going crazy. He's forgetting things, like Dan. Fuck all was another one, when we said Dan does fuck all. That's not actually true, though, I don't think. I think he does some stuff, but I just like to say that to him to annoy him. Memory like a goldfish was another one, which, remember, is someone that doesn't remember things very well, like Dan. And the opposite of that is someone who has a memory like an elephant, like me, apparently, which isn't true. Again, I just said that to annoy Dan. Dan used a nice word when he said that his memory is exemplary. So it basically means very good because it should be an example to other people, which it's definitely not. But anyway, we had flush down the toilet, which was similar to the ones that we had last week when we had flush the toilet. But if you flush something down the toilet, it basically disappears. I used an example of flushing a goldfish down the toilet, which I've never done and I don't recommend to do. It was just a joke in the show. Dan said that I had put him on the spot during the show because I didn't give him time to prepare for a question when I asked him what he would die for. He said, look, you've put me on the spot, which, remember, is not true because I did give him time to prepare. He just didn't read the email. We had the word sniper, which is a person, I don't know if they're in the army, but it's someone like in secret that hides in a secret place and shoots someone. They say JFK got killed by a sniper that day. You know, I don't know if that's true because, you know, nobody knows, do they? Where the hell are you is another one, which is just a strong way to say, where are you? You could say, where the fuck are you? Is even stronger if you want to. If you don't, you know, don't bother. Creepy was another one, which is someone that's a bit strange and just makes you feel a bit uncomfortable. We use the example of someone writing down names of people they meet in a book. It's a bit creepy. You know, it's not the most normal thing to do in the world. So you'd say he's a bit creepy. We had the word dip when I said to Dan, I'm just wondering why we've seen this dip in your memory. So dip is when it goes down, like a sudden movement of something going down. Often we use for graphs. So, you know, if you do the IELTS exam, I think question 1 of the writing, you have to describe a graph. So often you will have to use this word dip. We had the phrasal verb keep up with. When I said to Dan, the world moves quickly and you need to keep up with it. So it means you need to go at the same speed as this world, which Dan has difficulty doing. And we had bring up, which I think is probably the most common phrasal verb we use on this show. It's when you start talking about something. We were talking about the time when Dan left me in Verona. And I said that we had brought that up on a different podcast because we had spoken about it on a different podcast. Anyway, that is all the rock and roll vocabulary for today. Thanks a lot for listening. Remember to go to the website, rockandrollenglish.com, to see all the vocabulary so you remember it, because otherwise there's not much point listening to all the new words if you don't remember them. So go there, write them down, and try to remember it all. So have a great week. Try not to forget things like Dan, and just keep on rocking, baby.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.